Smartphones these days have amazing stabilization and are pretty much okay for basic handheld moves. But if you want professional looking shots, you are gonna need a gimbal. Try and do any crane up type of shots or rotating parallax shots around someone, and that's pretty much impossible. The question is, which one is the right gimbal for you? Because they are very different for very different uses. And the first one and most obvious is obviously the type of camera that you use, because it's not the same to film with an action camera than it is with a smartphone, than it is with a compact camera. And in that regard, that is right away gonna dictate the type of gimbal or the kind of gimbal that you can use. If you use a compact camera, it's very different than if you use a smartphone. And even when using a smartphone, it's very different if you just use the smartphone than if you use accessories like lenses and filters. And in this video, I'm going to be using the Hohem Gimbals, not only because I use them a lot, but because they have a Memorial Day 2.5-week discount period. So if you've ever thought about getting a gimbal, this is the right time. And it goes without saying that if you use a compact camera that you can also use interchangeable lenses, you're gonna need the MT2 or similar gimbal. The MT2 is great because it's gonna allow you to use this camera, but also pretty much anything that you want, a smartphone with lenses, an action camera if that's what you want. That is gonna be the gimbal to use. It's gonna give you a flexibility that, for instance, a smartphone gimbal is not gonna give you. If, on the other hand, you film with a smartphone, whether it's with or without lenses, you want one of these two gimbals, either the M6 or the M7, the latest version of Hohem. The M6, it's a bit more basic gimbal, it's a first generation gimbal. The M7 is the latest one, but they are going to be able to hold a smartphone with pretty much any lens that you put. If you're the kind of person that doesn't want to dive through complex menus and lots of different options, the M6 is probably a great solution because it's a much basic gimbal, and it's actually still very popular with Hohem. But if you use a smartphone and you want the best functionality, this is the kind of gimbal that you want to go. Now, when things get really interesting is when you're bringing these portable gimbals, because these are gimbals that they collapse on themselves and they're very portable. Now, what you need to understand is the payload for these gimbals is going to be very different than for this gimbal. You are trading portability for functionality. So yes, you can still use a smartphone, but anything more than a filter and these gimbals cannot handle it. It's an inherent limitation of this design. If you want something that is portable, that you can easily pack away and put in your rucksack, this is a compromise that you need to live with. Another option to think about is the kind of content that you film, because if you film something that is anywhere near professional, a corporate environment where you go and film with other people, you are most likely going to be filming with a mirrorless camera of some sort, and the MT2 is the gimbal that you want to use. If you film content for social media, for pretty much any platform, whether it's horizontal or vertical, and you use your smartphone, the M6 and the M7 are the way to go, because you don't need the additional payload and size that you get with an MT2, and you just want something that is good, that does the job, and is reliable. Personally, I use the M7 a lot when it comes to filming with a smartphone, and it's a great gimbal. It's not perfect. There are quirks and kinks that you have to go through, but as a whole, out of all the smartphone gimbals that I've used, is the best one. Now, obviously, if you are someone that needs to be mobile, that needs to be traveling a lot, that you need to be on the move, and you don't want to have something that is obviously is a lot bigger, and you want to be very compact and fast moving, this is the way to go. What you need to understand is that the functionality that you get on this gimbal is not the same as this one. So you're gonna have to work around the limitations that a gimbal like this gives you. But as long as you know that and you work around it, you are probably gonna be okay. Now, the question that you also have to ask yourself is, do you need to be portable? Whatever it is that you do, does it require to have a gimbal tucked away in your rucksack or camera bag? Or you need something that does the job and is a lot more functional and it actually suits better the format that you're trying to do? So in that regard, obviously, portability, that's a no-brainer. A gimbal like this is always gonna be a lot more portable than any of these three other gimbals. But when it comes to functionality, any of these three gimbals will blow out of the water this portable gimbal. Again, that's a decision that only you can make. And the same applies to payload. Back to what I said earlier in the video, it's not just the camera that you use, but the payload. Because if you use a smartphone on its own and you don't want to be carrying a big gimbal, the portable gimbal will do the job and will do it well. If you use a smartphone and you want to use third-party lenses or filters, that is not going to be a good gimbal. You need to use these two gimbals. And if you need the biggest payload because you're going to be switching potentially from a mirrorless camera to a smartphone, the MT2 is the way to go, because you just can't mount a mirrorless camera to these gimbals. Again, what you do, how you do it, and where you do it pretty much dictate the kind of gimbal that you need to go for. And another thing to have very much in mind is whether you do any kind of vlogging in your filming. For instance, if everything that you do is customer oriented and you're just gonna be holding the gimbal as you traditionally use a gimbal, and you might be using a camera like this, the MT2 is a great choice. I genuinely like this gimbal. It's really good. But if you do any kind of vlogging, despite the fact that these are very lightweight cameras, it gets tiring. And also the MT2 doesn't have a selfie stick, which on the other hand, this is something that you have on the M7. You have a selfie stick or extended pole, whatever you want to call it, but obviously it means that you need to use your smartphone. Now for vlogging, you could argue the case that you are better off with a smaller compact setup than with a big, much more professional setup, because for the simple fact that audiences on social media platforms are much more forgiving on whether you have a very shallow depth of field or blurred background and cinematic look compared to the actual value of what it is that you're vlogging about. So if you want a gimbal to do any kind of vlogging and you just want to be mobile and move around quickly, this is a great option. It's really fast to mount the gimbal on it, and if you have an issue with the tilting range, you just lift this up a little bit and angle this, and that's it. That you got your extra or additional tilting range. And I would personally never disregard how important it is to have a selfie stick when it comes to vlogging, because it will give you a wider field of view and you're not going to have the phone or the camera so right up on your face. And in that regard, the M7 and the V3 are the way to go. I would probably never vlog with a camera and a gimbal, for the simple fact that you might be okay for the first 30 seconds, but after 45, 50, a minute, your arm is gonna hurt and you are never gonna get the same level of quality as you do with these gimbals. And another thing to take into consideration comes down to tracking. Is this something that you value? And in that regard, these 4 gimbals from Hohem have an integrated AI tracker that you can use with the Hohem app or with your preferred third-party camera app. So I don't think there is a huge difference in that regard. I would say that the integration of the AI tracker feels a little bit better on the MT2 than on the V3, but all 4 gimbals do it, and they do it really good. And one of the things that is really important when choosing a gimbal is the kind of shots and range of movement that you need. Because if you're the kind of person that likes to be doing this jib arm or crane up type of shots where you go from the ground up, or any kind of wacky shots that requires a big tilting range or no restrictions of movement whatsoever, the V3 is not going to be a gimbal for you. Because even though you can do crane up type of shots by turning the gimbal upside down and doing it, it's not a natural motion, and you are never going to get the same quality of shots that you're going to get with either an M7 or an MT2. So when it comes to deciding the right gimbal for you, it's not just one aspect, like, oh, I want a portable gimbal because it's compact and I can put it in my rucksack. No, you need to take into consideration all these aspects. What do you do, when you do it, how you do it, and where you do it. I mean, there are so many things that only you can decide. And ultimately, the most important thing is the price. Because obviously, a gimbal for larger cameras and mirrorless cameras like the MT2 is always going to be more expensive than a compact gimbal for smartphones like the V3. And sitting in between, you have the M6 and the M7, which in my opinion are really good gimbals. Now, any of these 4 gimbals are really good. They're gonna do the job and they're gonna do it really well. And I don't think it's the right thing for me to say whether you should use this gimbal if you are a beginner, or these are the gimbals if you are someone halfway through your journey or as a content creator, or this bigger gimbal like the MT2 if you use more professional cameras and you are a professional in your career. Because even though technically that is more or less true, that is actually wrong, because you could be a 100% professional with 15 years of experience and still use this gimbal. You just need to decide, based on everything that we discussed in this video, what's the right gimbal for you, regardless of what stage in your career you are in. And in that regard, Hohem has this Memorial Day discount season or discount period between the 12th and the 29th of May, where they're giving big discounts, not just on the gimbals, but on bundles where you can include a tripod, for instance, which is really helpful if you do any kind of tracking. So you can have the tripod at a certain height and it's sturdy and reliable and safe. Or, for instance, wireless microphones. These are actually really nice. Or side handles if you do any type of underslang type of filming. Pretty much anything that you need related to gimbals that you need to support your career as a content creator. So if you have ever been thinking about investing on any gimbal or have been considering upgrading your gimbals, I think this is a great opportunity. And remember that, like everything in life, if you want to get really good at anything, you need to practice, practice, practice. The more you practice, the better you get at it. Regardless of whatever fancy gear or equipment you have, believe me, it's just down to practice. And if you are still thinking whether you should invest in a gimbal or stick to your smartphone, I have this video here where I literally go through the difference between filming with a smartphone and filming with a gimbal, what you can do, how and when. Click on it and I'll see you there.